Well, I had been under contract to Warner Brothers, and then I bought my contract out. War Gods of the Deep happened after I left Warner Brothers. I did a few other films that came to Cordura and a few others, but then along came Arkoff and Nicholson, and I got a chance to work for them. And it was hard to get work when you didn't have a studio, behind you, and the whole industry was changing then. Television had come in a big way. Operation Bikini and War Gods of the Deep were offered to me, and I thought, oh yeah, it's work, absolutely. And Vincent Price, I love Vinny. He was a great guy. I had met him many, many years prior to that, so I was anxious to work with him.
Can you save my city?
From the volcano?
Yes, can you stop it, tame it, kill it?
I met Vincent Price on my very first film, Island of Desire. And he was down in Jamaica. We were filming in Jamaica, and he was down there on his honeymoon to his first wife. Well, I knew who Vincent Price was because I loved his persona on screen. He was like Clifton Webb, had a distinct persona. All those leading men and borderline character actors all were so distinct, and he was definitely one of those. I saw a few of Vinny's films. One of them was the 3D one. Which one was that?
House of Wax.
House of Wax, of course, where you put on the glasses in 3D. But we were working in London, and all the Brits referred to him as the Merchant of Menace, which was such a great, he loved it, because he had such a terrific sense of humor. So no matter what he did, he always had that little side that was laughing at it and enjoying it. And people picked up on that immediately, and that was part of his great charm.
But what chance did you give Dan?
Dan was a traitor. Your only crime was curiosity.
Vinny had, I think he was buying for Sears and Roebuck. He would buy art, and while we were on the set, if we'd get off from work early, I'd go with him to some of the little antique shops outside of London, and he would find a little watercolor here, a little original thing here, and he had wonderful taste. And people would say, I remember a woman one time at a gallery said, Vincent Price buying art for Sears and Roebuck, and she was kind of a snob about the whole thing, and I thought, look, if someone has a print of Picasso's Harlequin on a horse, but next year they all of a sudden evolve to the fact that they want an original watercolor of some kind, small little thing that was original, that's a step in another direction, and how wonderful. You can't put him down for opening up people's visions. And Vinny was very capable of doing that. He was a great guy. He was terrific. And he bought wonderful stuff. I loved working in London. I really loved it. You always worked with fine actors. And Pinewood Studios was a wonderful studio. They had a bar there where people would go out and get a drink. It was very civilized. When I signed to do War Gods of the Deep, I was supposed to have a car and a driver to take me home from the studio. If I finished early, there was never a car, and I'd have to sit around and wait and wait and wait and wait and wait, and I'd get a ride back in with Vinny to London, to downtown London. And I thought to the center of town, and I thought, oh my gosh. And I had a Mercedes coming from Germany, so I thought, I'm going to drive my own car out. And the woman, I've been after her for months, because my contract said, just give me my own transportation. I had a call to be on the lot. I've never done this before in my life, and never would I do it again. But I was driving, I drove my car out to the studio, and I had a call to be there at 7 a.m. I said, where's Pinewood? He said, where are you? You're late. I said, no, don't worry about it. I'll be there in a little while. And I stopped and had breakfast along the way and watched the ducks swimming in a canal, and called about an hour later and said, where's Pinewood? And they said, where are you? You're holding up the production. I said, I'm really sorry, but I'll be there. And I finally showed up. And the woman who was producing came up to me, and she was tough. And she said, you're late. And I said, well, I've been after you. I won't drive my car, but I'm supposed to have transportation, and it's never here. She said, well, you got your own car from now on.
Self-portrait. Do you like it?
It's a good likeness, if anybody would want such a thing.
While in London, I was staying at a friend of mine's flat, Mr. Baring, and Mr. Bering, I'd been looking for a dining table since I'd sold this wonderful Italian table. I couldn't find one in Italy when I was there working. And Mr. Bering said to me one evening, well, so have you found your table yet? And I said, oddly enough, I did find a table, but it was English. It's Jacobean, and it's really quite wonderful. He said, do you like it? I said, Mr. Bering, I don't like it. I love it. He said, then I think you should have that as a gift, as a remembrance of this trip. And he purchased a table from Woolsey Antiques in London that to this day I have. It's right in my dining room, and it's very embracing. I knew Jacques Tourneur was a very, very old Hollywood director who'd done a lot of interesting films. He was a very easygoing, wonderful director to work for because he wasn't in your face. He knew what he wanted, and that was important. When you worked for Arkoff and Nicholson, you didn't have really long shooting schedules, but we got the work done in a reasonable amount of time, and I think that picture turned out fairly well for what it was. I do remember the sets were wonderful. I think that's so important in films. I really believe that. Good set decoration, you know, putting you into that whole atmosphere that you want to create. The Italian filmmakers had to make things work with no money in the 60s. A lot of filmmakers who were able to create something with very little. I really respect people who were able to do that. You know, today they just spend gazillion dollars and you look at it and you go, what happened? Production quality is really important, and particularly if you have a very limited budget and can make it work. Art for art's sake and being commercial, I think that blend is very important, because art for art's sake can lose a lot of people, and if it's just too commercial, it sometimes lacks the other. And I think the marriage of the two is really a hard thing to find, but it's wonderful when it happens.
Would you give me a hand?
Yeah, well, of course.
Thank you.
David Tomlinson was my sidekick. Wonderful British actor. Did a lot of work, I'm sure, in the theater as well as motion pictures. And he was a solid citizen, and that's what's important, to work with good people. Well, Susan and I did a few films together. She wound up marrying Jim Nicholson, who was the producer of that film. And she was a sexy little thing and very sweet, very nice. And today she lives down in the desert and lives a quiet life. And I only spoke to her a few months ago, and it was wonderful to reconnect with her.
How nice to see you. Her name is Herbert.
Her name is Herbert.
Most animals, when you work with them, do steal the show, and they're entitled to it if it's a good animal. Well, you nailed it when you said against a backdrop, because they wouldn't stick us underwater. What they would do is they'd have all that rear screen projection, and then you'd have this big helmet on. And I do remember that because I've always been a little claustrophobic, and that always kind of made me feel a little uncomfortable. It is wonderful that audiences are discovering films like that. To change the subject slightly, I went on a Turner Classic Movie cruise last year with Robert Osborne, and walking on the upper deck one night, all these wonderful movie buffs were out there on deck chairs with a blanket over them and a drink beside them, watching this enormous screen with some old films. Some were wonderful film noir, some were not so wonderful, but just the idea and creating that atmosphere, I thought, how terrific that these people are that enthusiastic about those older films. Vincent Price is one of those wonderful actors who was really a contributor. And I think in life, people must be aware of contributing. That's an important thing. Whether it's on in the motion pictures, or whether it's just in our relationship with other people. It's all about trying to tell a story and something that people can relate to, or have it move you, or have it touch you some way, mentally or spiritually, or somehow it should reach out to you as an audience. I just like being in that type of film. It wasn't the best script, but I worked with some good people, and that's important because you learn from them.